Look at where you are today. We're jealous because we're actually into some cold weather the last couple of days here in Calgary, and you guys still have a heat wave down
Yeah,
Vancouver, right?
I'm visiting from Toronto. I'm visiting my daughter and her parents right now, and it is
Yeah,
bloody hot.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think I was
yeah.
telling you before. My daughter's moved into Vancouver. When did yours move down there? Has she always been there, or?
5 years? No.
Oh, okay.
So we're from Winnipeg originally, and then her and my partner and other kids, we moved to Toronto in 2006.
Right.
And then Sydney went back to Winnipeg for a few years, and then she came out here to BC, and she loves like it's you
Yeah,
look everywhere you look, there's friggin' mountains. Like
yeah.
how can you go wrong with that? But it is really hot, and the people in BC don't have air conditioners like everywhere else, so
Yeah,
he's kind of
yeah,
suffering, and I'm
yeah,
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 it's
yeah.
warm.
Yeah, we had the opposite in Australia. There are certain parts of Australia that don't have air conditioning, and there are other parts that don't have heating,
Mm,
and because the weather, you only get a week worth of cold weather or a week's worth of hot weather,
wow.
depending where you're at, and so they don't have that sort of stuff. And it was interesting when we first moved to Australia that we're going, what? You don't have heating?
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, it's great. But look, I love what you've been doing, obviously, and we met a few weeks ago, and I thought, wow, there's so much for you to share. We really need to get onto a live and exchange some more ideas, have an opportunity to get to know each other even a little bit
Hmm.
more.
Love it.
And so, let me just introduce you properly here, based on our discussion and my understanding. You launched a program called the Head to Heart Method Coaching Program, and you run a podcast. She's the owner, which is great. Well, I love the title, and
Thank you.
your superpower is helping mission-driven female entrepreneurs build
Hmm.
successful businesses by teaching them how to get out of their head and into their heart to crush their goals in 90 days. And that's probably what every entrepreneur needs, and
Right.
regardless women or not, right? Yeah. um, you're also the founder or co-founder of the content company in
Hmm.
Toronto, because you and your partner started this, and with your digital marketing background, it was a perfect education platform uh, for that, and a highly respected program. I understand. What amazes me is you've got four girls. Right?
I know. It
So,
amazes me.
yeah, yeah. It's 12, 20, 24, and 33. And I'm not even going to go into the you just don't look it, but that's obvious, I
Well,
think.
the 33-year-old, I will put a disclaimer. She is my stepdaughter, but my
Okay.
my oldest is 24. But yes, I
Yeah,
don't like
yeah.
to just say, "Oh, my stepdaughter." I don't like to identify her
No,
that way,
no,
so I
but
always just say
yeah.
my daughter. But
Yeah,
yes, that
it's
one I
great.
did not birth. I
Mm.
would have been 11.
Wow. So Cara spent the last 20 years of her life discovering who she is and why she was put on this earth. She's an active member of
Mm.
Tony Robbins' community and mission to send 1,000 women to the Unleash the Power event with Tony. And that's really amazing because he does some great, great work. And I think you and I were talking about, the whole NLP and my background, and how I got into the psychology and the NLP, and I was introduced to that very early. I was fortunate; I was in high school, um, and that stuck with me, even though I went down the skills area of engineering and electronics.
Right.
The behavior was always interesting, and that's what's really brought me back to that. So I think we have some similar journeys
Hmm.
of that realization and self discovery. And I think every coach needs to go through that, but I digress. So,
I would agree, and I'm happy to talk about that too. But yeah, it is.
mm.
There's a lot of. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to dive in, but there's a
Yeah,
lot of
let's do that.
coaches
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay. So So thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate you. Absolutely. I love coming on and talking with other coaches and other people who are mission driven. But I think there's this really interesting thing that's happening right now in our space where people are getting certified and really don't have the life experience or really don't, because in my view, most good coaches really come from some type of trauma or some type of massive life experience that they've had along the way, or many of them, and get to this point in their life. Typically it's like 30, late 30s and older, and this was my experience, where you sort of start thinking there has to be a better way to do this. There has to
Right.
be a better way to
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
It's not meant to feel this much of a hustle and this much of a drag all the time.
Mm.
And so I think when you talk about, yeah, I mean, I read my first Tony book when I was 20, but none of it sunk in really yet
Mm.
until I was sort of like at that point where I was ready to hear it. But yeah, so I absolutely agree and feel the same way.
Yeah, yeah, and likewise, I was in the corporate world, working the grind, and got out of that to get into the entrepreneurship and started several businesses. But it wasn't until really it got cemented and the penny dropped that what I was doing with a lot of my team members and leadership and the consulting work and so forth really came together when we started the coaching firm, and that's
Mm,
when you know all of the Acumat stuff that you see today really evolved from that in
right.
2007 onwards. So I love the fact that we sometimes have to go to our past and just look at where we got some of this information to discover who we are, right?
Hmm.
So tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about that journey of your discovery.
Um, how much time do we have? No, I'm teasing.
Yes.
It so for me, what brought me to coaching in particular, like what brought me, yeah, I mean, I guess how far back do I go? I think for probably about 20 years, I tried to fit into working for someone else. I'm a, hopefully I can curse. I'm not going to go crazy, but I'm a shitty employee, right? I'm not someone you want working for you ever. And the trick about it was that for a long time, the conditioning, right, the NLP and the societal conditioning told me I had to. And I came from a rough environment. My parents were alcoholics. There was physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse. And so early on, I had this idea that if I was going to be happy and successful, I have to do it in the same way that everybody else is doing it. And the problem with that was that it felt so wrong. It never felt like it fit. So I would do this thing over and over again. I would think, well, my friends are going to university, I should go to university. But I had
Right.
no desire to go to university,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
wouldn't do it.
Mm.
And ultimately, it came to then I would start a business and then I would stop the business because I didn't really know what I was doing. And then
Right.
I'd start another little business. And then I'm thinking, oh, it's the business. I should go find a job. And I did this nonsense for 20 years.
Oh.
And
Mm.
it was, and when I talk about my mission, yes, my mission is to help women who want to have high impact companies, etc. But really underneath all of that, it is letting anybody who doesn't fit in understand that entrepreneurship, like you and I are both old enough to remember when entrepreneurship was what you did when you couldn't do anything else. Just like real estate was once upon a time, just
Yeah.
like being a mortgage or those, oh, she's a real estate agent, oh, because she couldn't hack it in university.
Mm.
And like that's the conditioning, that's the
Mm.
psychology and
Mm.
the conditioning that we're told. And so forever I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me. And so when I speak to other women, because women in my program are in their 40s and older, they've done the corporate thing and they're like,
Right.
I've made all this money and I still hate it. And so that was my experience. I started the content company. It's a 7-year company, multiple six figures, really
Mm.
healthy company. But I was like I'm not feeling that thing that
Mm.
I'm supposed to feel. And so I did a lot of Tony Robbins work, a lot. I mean, I spent a lot of money. I've invested a
Mm.
lot in my development. And I fought it still for a few years. Even when I launched the She's the Owner podcast, I talked to women about masculine and feminine energy in business and relationships. Even then, I still fought it.
Right.
And then eventually, actually in 2020, I finally said, okay, I get it. Like, the universe is going to give it to you repeatedly until you wake up and pay attention. And so I launched the coaching company side of my business. And it's, you know, there's a lot that has to be undone when we talk about NLP, we talk about conditioning. There's a lot that has to be undone for women, really, truly.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I'm obsessed with because just like Tony, right? Like, I hate when anyone is suffering. I'm choosing to go and help the women who were suffering in the way that I was suffering because it's not hard. Once you see how to get kind of out of that paradigm, it's not easy. I'll never say it's easy,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
certainly a lot more fulfilling. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like a snapshot of my journey so far.
Yeah, and I was talking to someone just earlier today, and we were talking about the journey to the let me call it the awakening moment of going, this doesn't feel right, and I don't know what to do about it, and it's do they go into a depression, or where do they go when that moment happens? And I think that's where coaching has been really helpful for a lot of people. Is it starts the journey of self-awareness.
Right.
But what we were talking about, and maybe this is relevant here, and see if this resonates with yourself, is other people don't. I have to be careful how I say this. Other people don't see us as successful. Not that that should be important, but until we believe in ourselves,
Right.
and until we discover who we are in ourselves, so I get a lot of coaches saying, I have trouble closing clients, and I go, well, who are your clients? Well, everybody. Well, hang on a sec,
Right. No, you're not Walmart.
Yeah. So did you find that that's the same thing? Do you get? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I do. I mean, it's interesting. In about 45 minutes, I'm actually doing a master class on how to love selling, and that is like one of those things that comes up over and over again. And this is my fundamental. I I I don't know how you sell, so I'm not going to put you in the group. But they're out there. The hard sellers are out there, and they're in there in coaching. And I think that's super dangerous because coaching is such an intimate thing. I'm not selling widgets, right? I'm selling hope. And so if I'm aggressive, or I'm hunter mode, right? The masculine, when I'm in that closing mode, I don't feel good. I've sold things for 20 years, one thing or another. I don't feel good in that moment. And so when I'm working with clients, like, that seems to be one of the biggest things, or prospects even. I hate selling. I hate selling. I can't close. And I always, just like you, like, I always go back to, first of all, the word selling, like, if it's negative for you, stop saying it. Like, that's pretty simple, right? And I say building relationships. But if you are obsessed with the person you serve, there is no inauthenticity. If you're thinking about, I have to close this person, and I have to make this sale, and it's going to show up.
Yeah.
So when I talk about sales, it's like, if you're not like ground zero, foundation number one, who do I serve?
Yeah.
And when I'm obsessed with her, and I'm having a conversation with her, I love Tony. I love Tony, and I volunteer. I've been to so many events, and he's not the only organization that has people like this in it. But there are those sales guys who are like, well, if you can't find 50 ways to make this happen, then you don't want this enough, or we'll put it on 20 of your different credit cards. Like, that kind of shit doesn't work. Like, it might close it, but there's a whole host of things that will happen. And so when clients say to me, I don't know how to close, or I like, because you're in your ego. Period.
Yeah.
As soon as you get out of the ego and back into the heart, so out of the head and into the heart, you're not thinking about, I gotta close this deal. You're just, how do I serve this person? And maybe you can't, and that's okay too. So that's how I navigate through that.
No, you're preaching to the converted. So when I started the coaching firm, I actually bought a franchise because I didn't want to spend 10 years building all new content. And the first couple of months, I really struggled because I was out there selling that system, And then one day I woke up and I go, you know what? This isn't working, So I just put it aside, and I said, instead of the system being the strategy that's going to save them, they're looking at me.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
they're not looking at the system. I'm the person sitting in front of them. And
Right.
so I call it, if if I show up and I care, then there is nothing that they can say that is not about me helping them, right?
Right. Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And they'll feel it. Like, I think that's the coolest part about what we're seeing right now is that people are really leaning into intuition because they've had to, right? Like,
Mm,
if 2020 taught us anything, it was to try to learn how to lean back into some type of faith that we're going to be okay and that this is going to calm down and things are going to be okay. And I think in that movement, people started to connect better with intuition, and they can tell if you're just sitting there trying to. I mean,
oh
I've
yeah.
done it in my younger years. They can
Mm.
tell, and it's like I know it's, and I love when I hear other men who are, because I know many of them who sell in that way, who are really about the client and about the person and not about the number.
Right.
But there's a lot of work even in that area to do because women have been taught by men to do it that way, and then they get off the phone and they're like, "Well, I didn't close it," or "God, I feel like shit," or the person comes back and wants a refund. I did that all the time in retail.
Mm.
I could
Oh
sell
yeah.
you 20
Yeah.
pairs of pants and you'd be happy leaving out the door, and then
Yeah.
you'd come back in 3 days later with 20 pairs of pants, and
Yeah.
then the numbers, and so
Yeah.
it just, it's exciting when I hear other people who get that, but there's still a lot who don't. And I think in coaching in particular, it's given us a bit of a challenge
Mm-hmm.
because everyone's so, here we go, the coach is
Mm-hmm.
going to do this and da da
Yeah.
da, like,
Well.
yeah,
Yeah.
so lots of fun
Well,
stuff.
and that brings us full circle back into the behavior intelligence, which is, as you know, my focus and my journey is to, get behavior intelligence or get people intelligent about their behavior, right,
Right.
around
I
the
love
world.
that.
Okay, and whether it's coaches, leaders, team members, family members, men, women, it doesn't really matter. When we're intelligent about looking in the mirror, right?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing what we're doing that is not aligned with our intention, and
Yep.
but for a lot of people, and I go back to what you said earlier, if you don't know who you are, your intentions are mixed up, your
Right.
vibes are mixed up, right? you know
Right.
Eh, so you show up thinking, oh, I think I'm doing all the right things, but you're doing all the wrong things, and your
Right.
vibes are all wrong. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's interesting you say that because that, and I want to just put the disclaimer out that just because we're coaches doesn't mean we know everything, even though a lot of them are still in that zone, right? They're like, I'm a coach, I don't need that, I'm good. I'm a coach and I'm going to need a coach forever. And I feel
Yeah,
like
that's right.
that's just something that a good coach really understands.
Mm,
And so, when you're talking about the vibe, for the last probably 8 months or so, I have a coach. I work with him. He's a really incredible guy. He has his systems and formulas. And what I've noticed is that mine aren't in alignment with what I've been trying to do. And so that's one of the biggest pieces too when you talk about selling, right? Is that if you're not in alignment and you don't energetically believe what you're saying, it
mm-hmm.
won't work.
Yeah.
So you can get into these discovery calls and sales calls and you can talk all day, but if you don't vibe with it and it's not in alignment with you, you're not going to have any success. And for me, there's a lot of, high ticket coaches right now. Everywhere you look, it's how to get more high ticket clients, da 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 da. I'm the blue collar type of woman. Every company I've started was to help service the blue collar entrepreneur. And so what I realized is that I wasn't in the right vibration of a high ticket coach.
Right.
I'm just not that person. I want to help more than I want to help.
Mm,
Like for me, it's
mm.
volume because
Right.
that's my mission. I'm creating an army of love soldiers. Like that's the overall mission. And so when you're saying that, it's like that will happen to any entrepreneur at any part of their journey,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be okay with it. And it's ugly at first because ego gets in there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And all of a sudden you're
Mm,
like, well, I shouldn't have done this, or I should have done all these
mm,
things.
mm.
But ultimately, it's like a rebirth. So once you and I hope that your audience, like when they're hearing this, they're understanding that it's not a fault, it's not something wrong with you. It's just you weren't listening fully to intuition.
Right.
And once you tap into that, it really does align, and you will feel different about your business.
Yeah.
You won't think different, you will feel differently about your business. So
Yeah. 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 Over the last 5 years, maybe it's been around for even longer than that, but the term imposter syndrome just keeps coming up, and I go, you know what, you know, you guys got to let go of that. It just means you haven't discovered who you are, and
right.
you're not aligned with who you are. So, yes,
right.
you're a damn imposter. Get out of there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the funny part is, like, a true imposter doesn't know. They don't worry about being an imposter. They're just doing it.
Yeah.
Just like a sociopath doesn't go, Jesus, I wonder if I'm a sociopath. They're just behaving that way as a sociopath. And I mean, obviously, an extreme example, but an imposter isn't worrying about being an imposter because he doesn't think he is one.
Right.
That's what makes him the imposter, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know everybody, but you're right. It's just an alignment thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's become a label that gets used, and as you know, my pet peeve is these labels that are not helpful, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so the whole Acumat system, and you and you haven't even seen that, so I'm not sure you know what I'm talking about. But
No, I've seen of it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah, yeah. So we've just moved to, let's get to the specific behaviors so that we can become aware, right? What's the thinking behind that behavior? Can I learn a new thinking pattern? Well, yeah, you weren't born with this one. You can learn another one, right? So the intention is, in back to sales. I'm sorry, I'm digressing a little bit here.
That's okay.
Back to sales. With someone who complains about not closing, I look at their map and I go, okay, you're probably high options. You're just constantly looking for the next lead rather than working the one that you spoke to last week and going back and building the relationship, because you can't just
and it's
walk
what
up.
they believe about sales, right? Like, it's what, especially women, right? What they're believing about the process of a sale. And again, that goes back to the conditioning of their behavior, because it's like, what meaning are you giving this title? Like,
right.
I know I grew up watching Sesame Street, right? And in Sesame Street, and I'm actually going to talk about this in my masterclass, but like, he'd open his trench coat and he'd say, "What do I got to do to get you to buy an A?" Totally sketchy, right? Because they were selling Rolexes on Canal Street in New York, and that's what the play was.
Yeah.
And then you think about, my dad was a used car salesman, and so I had this whole story or belief system around selling. Don't you dare call me a salesperson. I would chew you out. I would not be happy.
Yeah.
I'm not in sales. And so, yeah, it's like, again, it's that belief structure, like what, and oftentimes when you follow the trail, right, just like you're saying, when you follow the trail, it almost always comes down to worthiness. That person's somewhere in there. It's a worthiness problem. It's not a tactics problem. It's not like, there's a lot of business coaches who don't, and I get the clients that go to them, right? They know all how to build the funnels, how to do the sales process, how to everything. All the tools are there. Why aren't they doing it?
Yeah.
Because they haven't done the inner work to address the psychology of why they don't pick up. Like I always say, like a house, you see a hammer and boards and someone says, go build a house. And they sit there for a year. Well, why didn't they pick up the hammer? Why didn't they pick up the tools? Because they did the psychology of even taking that step hasn't even been addressed. And then you have the other coaches who is all empowerment and all this other, right? Like all the kumbaya stuff, but they're broke because they're not teaching people how to make money after they've healed. So it's like, it's a dance, absolutely. But it's a two-part thing. Like one, I always say the mindset work can be independent of the business work, but the business work cannot be independent of the mindset work ever. It will fail. So you're again preaching to the converted. That was the challenge in our firm. All the systems were business systems, and there wasn't enough people, discovery, learning, self-awareness,
realizing,
The ugly stuff.
yeah, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yes. No,
I've
no,
had,
no.
I've had
God's
coaches.
child
Oh,
fell to
I
what?
don't
At
do
least the
that
power
soft stuff.
within.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's life coaching. I don't do
Right.
that.
Well, you go try and have your business, and then we'll talk to you in a year when you realize it's not working. It's fine.
Yes,
It's okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, one of those uh, you know things that fall into that criteria, comes to mind. I just had one this morning, a situation where I hadn't heard from someone that we had such a great connection and everything was wonderful, and I hadn't heard from them for over a week, and I'm going, oh, should I follow up or shouldn't I follow up? You have a lot of people that go, oh, I don't want to bother them, or,
Right.
that would be selling, and maybe I shouldn't do that because I don't want to be harassed, so their own mindset. So,
Right.
obviously I reached out and, oh, thank you. I lost that connection. I needed to connect
Right.
with you and I couldn't find it. Thank you for reaching out,
Right.
such powerful result from what could have been a
Loss.
disastrous situation because I didn't want to do the work or my belief
Right.
system wouldn't let me do
Right.
that, right? Hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that
And I
happened in
think
the
it's a
firm.
balance too, right?
Hmm. It happened in a firm all the time. Coaches would complain about prospects and complain about meetings or clients not
Mm-hmm.
doing the work. Yeah, because you're not helping them. You're just giving them homework on their business.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And it's like I don't know. I mean I had a coach like that where every week we would meet and I would get a list of things to do. And I give homework, don't get me wrong.
Mm.
But I give homework based on like even when I do this class this afternoon, I have a schedule of what I guarantee you it's gonna go out the friggin' window like within 5 minutes because I think good coaching comes from intuition, but intuition only comes from the heart. It does not come from the head.
Right.
And like when you're doing those lists, that's a masculine hunter way to teach. And it
Mm.
men, women, we all have stuff we need to unpack before we're even going to listen to the other parts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like when I worked in SEO, when you're talking about clients complaining and not doing the work, I mean, so search engine optimization is a very competitive game. And if you get a lead, you better work that lead. And
Yeah.
so we would get clients who are like, no, I'm not getting any leads or they're not tuning. And I would go and sit with them and I would look at every bloody lead. And I'm like, you've got
Right.
30 people who filled out a conversion form on your site. Well, yeah, well, I mean, like we were only able to get to like two of them, or I would listen to the calls because they would have call recording, and I would listen, and it was disaster.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? Like when we talk about entrepreneurship, this is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to bust your ass, but it's easier to bust your ass when you're obsessed with who you serve. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it's work. Gotta do the work.
Yeah. Wow, look at the time. So yeah,
Yeah, already.
we were afraid that this would happen, but it's great because we can have a follow up.
There you
And I
go.
think we'd love to have you back. You and I obviously have a great connection and great synergy,
Yeah.
so we would be remiss if we didn't schedule another follow up. So I'll follow up
I
with
would
you to
love
do that.
that.
Yeah. Just before we go, I'd like to, summarize a little bit, 2 or 3 key points that you would leave our audience with. What would you say 2 or 3 key points from today would be? Let's give them some
Well, I would
homework.
say, yeah, I mean, so if you're an entrepreneur and you're not feeling in alignment, so before that, one of the things I always love for clients to do is the perfect day exercise because I find that when you're trying to really design a life that you want, right? Like Tony says, a life on your terms. People are still sort of loosey goosey about it. They don't really know. So I always say write out and it 2 3 pages, like none of this one paragraph bullet points. I want people to really sink in, play some music that you feel really inspired by, plug in, have paper and a pen. We're not typing, and write out your day from top to bottom in a perfect scenario and get very detailed. Like, what does it smell like? What is the sun? How's the sun hitting you? What do you do first? Who's beside you? All that type of thing. And that starts to sort of open up the creative juices on how to design a business of your dreams, the life of your dreams, all of those things. The other piece I would say is that when you follow your passion, the money will show up. It may not show up right
Right.
away, but it will show up.
Yeah.
And the universe and your clients can feel if you're authentic or if you're full of shit. Period. End of
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And so the third piece to that is when you are stuck in the ego, and the ego, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like I statements. It looks like what's in it for me instead of what's in it for them. So when you start to feel, or when you feel even resistance, that's your ego. And so if you're feeling it in that moment, just again, like close the eyes, get really centered. Like I close my eyes a lot. And you ask any of my clients in my group coaching, I'm half the time I'm like this. And they don't even bat a lash at it anymore. But get out of your head and into your heart about who you're serving. Like that is the most key piece of any business. And because a lot of people say, well, oh, there's this need for this thing and I'm going to solve this problem. They don't care, right? And you and I both know, like year 1 and 2, when things aren't going your way and you don't really care about who you serve, it gets really hard to keep going. And then all of a sudden that job might look good or this other business might look good,
That's right.
right? You get that shiny toy
Yeah.
syndrome.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of the key
Cool.
things. I mean, that's a lot. I know I just big homework, but there it is.
Well, thanks, Cara.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone. This is all about behavior intelligence. And if you want to find out more about how to be more intelligent about behavior, please either, you've got Cara's information on the screen there, or come to our website where this recording will be on acumatchbi.com. Thank you. Take care, Cara.
Thank you.